thank you so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start my question about your trip to South Korea. People are still curious if there's any meeting with any of North Korean officials.
The first night I was there, Ivanka Trump and I had dinner with the president, President Moon, and his wife. We enjoyed talks about the Olympics, but we also obviously talked about the challenges that the peninsula is facing. We and the South Koreans are in full agreement that the issues, we're going to resolve the issues together, pulling the wagon in the same direction. Well, I don't know what that means. We do not have a very pleasant history of having talks with North Korea. You know, the last half a dozen times we've sat down with them over the decades, they haven't ended well because we were convinced they weren't acting in good faith. And obviously they weren't acting in good faith with the conduct that they've engaged in. So, and previously, other administrations, the North Koreans demanded that before they would sit down at the table, that they demanded they get food, that they get fuel and oil, and that sanctions be released or at least rolled back. And that was done. And we got nothing for it except a poke in the eye. And that is not going to happen again. If they are serious, if they're in good faith, if they want to talk in good faith, we want to talk in good faith. But as far as giving them anything to sit down at the table, we're not going to do that this time. All I can say at this point is that the situation's fluid. I mean, from the time I was there until I left, we went from a point where they didn't want to talk to them signaling that they do want to talk. That's only been over a 48-hour period. So again, that's up to them. We would hope, sincerely hope, that they would re-examine the position that they're in and decide that it's in their best interest, if it is in their best interest to talk. Well, we can't. There's one person in charge of all of this as to whether the talks take place, how they come out, whether or not North Korea changes its a line of thinking, whether it changes its ambitions. One person and one person only, and that's Kim Jong-un. We are totally reactive on this. We've seen what's happened. We have an objective, which the world has, and that is denuclearization of the peninsula. And that's true. All options are on the table, including military options. But one of the military options that's not on the table is the bloody nose strategy. I mean, nobody knows where that came from. I can tell you that I've talked to people throughout the U.S. government from top to bottom. Nobody in the U.S. government came up with that term. Nobody in the U.S. government came up with that strategy. It is not on the table. It is not something that was an option that was presented to the president. He has a lot of options, but the bloody nose strategy, which I'm assuming, I'm assuming what that means is some kind of a slap on the wrist or something like that. That is not a strategy that the president holds at this point. All options are on the table, particularly is in regards to military options. The quote, bloody nose strategy is about the smallest thing you could possibly do militarily.
A few days ago, I think there was last Friday, President Trump announcing a new sanctions on North Korea. He said, if the sanctions don't work,
Phase 2.
Phase 2. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, we all know what that means. I'm not going to say that so that you don't report it like that, but I think virtually anybody who is listening to that knows where do you go from here, because everybody has said we're out of road. We're at the end of the line. This has got to work. We hope it works. We pray it works. We hope we don't have to define what Phase 2 means, but people will know it when they see it. There's no question about that. I can't reveal any details like that. And as you know, this president has said consistently that as commander-in-chief, he will not telegraph when and how he's going to do this. Now, there's two examples for that since he's taken office. He's pulled the trigger twice. Once in Syria when they used chemical weapons, when Assad used chemical weapons against his own people, and once in Afghanistan when the Taliban did some pretty awful things to our military. Both of those were unannounced. Both of those were well planned, well executed, and he has said over and over again that's the way he does business. Now, look, nobody wants to do this. Before we talk about all these things, the talks need to be explored and see whether Kim Jong-un will come to his senses and realize that it's in his best interest, in his regime's best interest, if they want to survive as a regime, that he should choose the option of denuclearization on the peninsula and look at other ways to defend himself other than with the nuclear option. And we hope that it gets there. And President Trump was very clear. He said if the sanctions don't work, it'll be phase 2, and it's going to be very, very bad. And he's right. Whenever you have these, and I've been involved in a number of these deals, you have to have verification protocols in effect. And your question, I guess, also refers to the fact that this has happened all along and it's never been resolved before. Kim Jong-un is dealing with a different person in President Trump. He's not dealing with President Obama anymore. President Trump is dedicated to protecting the United States homeland, to protecting our allies, to protecting Americans that are in other parts of the world. He is deeply, deeply dedicated to that. He's going to do what's necessary to see that that happens. I think probably Kim Jong-un, who has access to the internet, his people don't have access to the internet, but he has access to the internet, and he's probably figured this out by himself, that he's dealing with a different person now than what he'd been dealing with. I'm not only on Foreign Relations Committee, I'm on the Intelligence Committee, and I can tell you we have access to lots of information, and we have ways and means of verifying those things. So I'm confident that if we make the agreement and have the right verification protocol in place, they're not going to be able to operate or create any new secret programs. You know, not really. The issue is denuclearization. We need to obtain it. You need to take one step at a time. The human rights violations in North Korea are disgusting. They're legendary. They're mammoth. People aren't going to live with that for very long. And right now, the focus is on the denuclearization. And I think that's what was on Secretary Tillerson's mind when he laid out the 4 no's.